Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmasvarupine avatara varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. Namaskar to all of you. Welcome to the study of the life and teachings of Swami Ramakrishna Maharaj, who was called Shishibhushan Chakravarti in his pre-monastic days. Now, we are studying many new incidences from his life and also from the complete works of Swami Ramakrishna Maharaj. We will now take up the sayings of Swami Ramakrishna Maharaj about Sri Ramakrishna. Swami Ramakrishna Anandaji or Shishibhushan Chakravarti is telling about Sri Ramakrishna. There was not the least trace of egotism in Sri Ramakrishna. He could not say the word I and mine. Instead of using the word mine, he used to say of this place and point to himself with his finger. For example, when he wanted to say that something was not his opinion, he would say, it's not the opinion of this place, because there was no ego consciousness in him. The cosmic ego of the Divine Mother worked through him. The playful Mother Kali, the mother of the universe, incarnated herself in the form of Sri Ramakrishna to give her innumerable children knowledge and devotion. Now, Shishi Maharaj is telling, I have tried to give the readers some glimpses of Sri Ramakrishna. So, but it is beyond my power to describe the full, even a particle of his infinite glory. If you, that is all of us, you people, are eager to know the truth, then meditate on the all purifying, all compassionate life of Sri Ramakrishna. Gradually, the self-luminous truth will reveal itself in your heart, and you will attain infinite strength, peace, and joy. You will consider yourself as blessed. Now, Swami Ramakrishna Maharaj is continuing to tell about Sri Ramakrishna. It was really Keshav Chandra Sen who may be said to have discovered Sri Ramakrishna and made him known to the world. At that time, Keshav Chandra Sen was the most prominent figure in Calcutta. His Brahma Samaj. So that Brahma Samaj which he was leading, that church was always crowded, and many young men were his ardent admirers. It was indeed impossible not to be moved by him. When he stood in his church, dressed in his white robe and talked with God, the tears streaming down his face, there was not a dry eye in the whole congregation. He was a really great soul and a true devotee. Sri Ramakrishna had heard of him and learning that he was staying in a garden not far from Dakshineshwar, he expressed a desire to go and see Keshav Chandra Sen. When Sri Ramakrishna entered, Keshav was sitting in meditation surrounded by a number of his disciples. All those half Europeanized youths looked scornfully at the plainly clad sadhu monk, that is Sri Ramakrishna, and when as soon as Keshav Chandra Sen opened his eyes, the visitor, Sri Ramakrishna, said, I see that your tail has dropped off. All these people began to laugh aloud, believing the stranger to be mad. Now Keshav checked them, stopped them. Then the master, apparently unmindful of the rudeness of the boys, explained, You see, Keshav, when a tadpole, the frog, the young one of the frog is called tadpole. You can see them inside the water. They will be similar to fish. When they are young babies, the tadpoles, they are very similar to fish, but they are not fish. So they go on moving like fish in the water. Then as they grow up, their tails drop off, and from then, after the tail is dropped, they will start living on the land. Until then, it will be in the water. And also the frogs have dual way of breathing. One is it has subcutaneous respiration, that is, it can breathe through the skin, and also they have the lungs just like the other animals. So they can breathe on the land afterwards, and they can also stay in the water. But when they are tadpoles, they can stay only in the water just like the fishes. They can't come out. But once the tail is dropped, they will then start coming onto the ground. So taking this example, Sri Ramakrishna is telling to Keshav, your tail has been dropped. I see that your tail has dropped off. Then Sri Ramakrishna is explaining, you see, when a tadpole is young and has a tail, it can live only in the water. But when its tail drops off, it can live both in water and also on the land. That's why it's called amphibian. Amphibian means it can live both in water and in land, amphibian. So once the tail is dropped, it can live both in the water and also on the ground. So while in the water, it has the subcutaneous respiratory system where it can breathe through the skin, and in the water. When out on the ground, it can normally, just like all of us, it can breathe. So this amphibian, the frog, has the capacity to live both on land and water once the tail is dropped. You see, when the tadpole is young and has a tail, it can live only in the water. But when the tail drops off, it can live both in water and on the land. So I see you can live both in the world and in God too. What a beautiful example by Sri Ramakrishna. Then Keshav Chandra Sen turned to his disciples and said, You see what words of wisdom this holy man speaks, such a great wisdom. And they were all abashed at the intelligence of Sri Ramakrishna, the words of Sri Ramakrishna. I had a desire to see the Paramahamsa of Dakshineshwar because Keshav Chandra Sen had spoken of him in such high terms. So this sentence is told by none other than our present hero of this book, Swami Ramakrishna Ananda. Shashibhushan Chakravarti is telling, as a young student, when he was not going to Sri Ramakrishna, he didn't know about anything about Ramakrishna. So Shashi Maharaj is telling, I had a desire to see the Paramahamsa of Dakshineshwar. Because why did he get the desire to see Sri Ramakrishna? Because Keshav Chandra Sen had spoken of Sri Ramakrishna in such high terms. So one day I went with 15 or 20 other boys. I was then reading for FA, First Arts, and others were all preparing for their matriculation. Being the eldest of the band, the conversation was addressed to me. The first time anyone went to Sri Ramakrishna, he would ask the visitor a question which was always on the subject about which that person knew most. The visitor would begin at once to talk eloquently as if he were teaching the master himself. Who would listen most intently? The man would talk on confidently, but he was sure to commit some blunder. Then Sri Ramakrishna would check him gently and point out his error with so much wisdom that the man would hear in wonder, suddenly realizing that this man to whom he was talking so freely was in reality a great sage. And never again would the visitor venture to speak in his presence, seeing his abundance of knowledge and wisdom. This happened to me too. Rishi Maharaj is telling the same thing happened to himself. Sri Ramakrishna asked me whether I believed in formless God or God with form. I began talking very glibly about whether there was a God at all. But it was the last time I ever talked before him in this fashion. It cannot be said that any of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples came to him directly through Keshav Chandra Sen, but Keshav Chandra Sen's devotion to him, that is devotion to Sri Ramakrishna, undoubtedly had much influence in leading them to Master. Keshav Chandra Sen used to urge Sri Ramakrishna to come to his Brahma Samaj. And once the Master went there. When Keshav saw him enter, he came down from his high seat and indicated to Sri Ramakrishna to take his place, the high pulpit from where he used to lecture. But the Master said, no, no, go on with your exercise. Go on with your exercises as you always have them. He had no desire to enter into a rivalry with Keshav Chandra Sen or to usurp his high place. The Master used to pray, O God, O Divine Mother, let all name and fame belong to Keshav Chandra Sen. O Mother, grant me only that I may have true devotion for thy lotus feet, holy feet. So Ramakrishna used to pray, O Mother, Divine Mother, let all name and fame belong to Keshav Chandra Sen. I don't want it. But what do I want, Mother? O Mother, grant me only that I may have true devotion for thy holy feet. Once Sri Ramakrishna was invited to attend a theatrical performance given by Keshav Chandra Sen's Samaj. One of the members of the Samaj, in talking with the Master, said, Keshav Chandra Sen is such a great lover of God. He must be an incarnation of Lord Gauranga. And Pratap Majumdar is always his companion. So he must be the incarnation of Nityananda, was a companion of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now that person asked Sri Ramakrishna, who are you then? Asking him, Keshav Chandra Sen was the great avatar of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Pratap Majumdar is always with him, so he is Nityananda, his companion. Then you must be also some companion of Keshav Chandra Sen or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So who are you in that avatara? He asked Ramakrishna himself. Then what was the reply of Sri Ramakrishna? Now the master clasped his hands, bowed his head, and replied, I am their servant. I am their servant. When Keshav Chandra Sen heard of this conversation, he turned to that arrogant man who questioned Sri Ramakrishna who he was amongst the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's companion. So Keshav Chandra Sen said to that man, You fool, how could you talk to Sri Ramakrishna in such a senseless way? One day, the master was explaining to Keshav Chandra Sen the different stages of bhakti, devotion. Even in devotion to God, there are different stages. So Sri Ramakrishna was explaining these different stages of bhakti, devotion to God. This thing was explained to Keshav. Keshav asked eagerly, and then what comes? In the end, Keshav, if I tell you, Ramakrishna replied, Keshav, if I tell you what comes next, then you will have to give up your teaching. All idea of teacher and student will disappear. Are you ready to give up everything? Are you ready to give up for that? No, no, sir. No, sir, replied Keshav. I do not wish to go so far. At that time, he was the guru of thousands of people in Bengal who looked to him for guidance, and he felt it was his duty to help humanity. Sri Ramakrishna is to declare that Keshav Chandra Sen was an eternal worker of God and would have to come again and again to help mankind. Now, Swami Ramakrishna Anandaji or Shishibhushan Chakravarti is continuing to tell about Sri Ramakrishna. The master actually was teaching from his very birth. His entire life was one long lesson. The life of Sri Ramakrishna himself was a long lesson, a teaching. The master, according to Shishi Maharaj, actually was teaching from his very birth. It was characteristic of Sri Ramakrishna that though he used the simplest language such as a child could understand, yet still that language carried thoughts that only a great sage could think. Whatever Sri Ramakrishna taught, I've been comparing with the Upanishad, with the Bhagavad Gita, such lofty ideals, only people like Narendra or Swami Vivekananda, Holy Mother Sharda Devi, and the other direct disciples could grasp the higher aspect of the teaching. But at the same time, when it had that weight of that highest teaching of Vedanta, it was so simple that even an uneducated person, a village person, could easily understand it. That is the speciality of his teaching. So Ramakrishna Anandaji is telling, it was the characteristic of him, that is master, that though he used the simplest language, such as a child could understand, yet still that language carried thoughts that only a great sage could think or speak. People would come to Sri Ramakrishna and ask for initiation into spiritual life, and to which Sri Ramakrishna would say, My dear sir, you are not meant to be a sadhu. You had better get a position and take care of your family. He was able to tell at a glance what a man was fit for. A disciple once told me, that is, the disciple asked Sri Ramakrishna, when asked how he would so clearly see what was in the other minds, the master replied, when you look through a window, you see everything in the room. Do you not? So when I look into a person's eyes, I see all that is behind in the mind, his personality, his past, his present, and future. Sri Ramakrishna never preached. If he went anywhere, it was to be among good men and blessed by their holy association. That was his idea. Nobody didn't invite him. He would go on his own. If he came to know there was a great man, there was a great person who loved God, there was no need of invitation at all. Even though he would be insulted there, he would not be given any prominence. He was not bothered about that at all. He used to go to that place. If he went anywhere, it was to be among good men and be blessed by their holy association. That was his idea. But when he was with them, the Divine Mother would rise up in him and he would begin to talk. It mattered not whether there was a few listeners or many listeners. Sri Ramakrishna was most careful in his speech and manner. Compared to him, we are all boors. Ramakrishna is telling, compared to Sri Ramakrishna, we are all boors. When do we call a man mad? Shishi Maharaj is asking all of us. When do we call a man mad? When there is incoherence in his thought and words. A person is called mad when there is no connection, when there is incoherence in his thought and words, or when that person behaves differently from others. But neither of these were true of Sri Ramakrishna. He was always most courteous, and every word he uttered was full of wisdom. Even when he would sit and talk to his Divine Mother, when he used to talk with Divine Mother Kali, he could only see the Divine Mother. Even when he would sit and talk to the Divine Mother, people could not possibly have taken him to be mad. For what was he doing? He was shaping the lives of those who sat there before him, awestruck by his words. He was satisfying the needs of each of those hearts and lifting their burdens. He had such wonderful power. Every time one went to see him, one felt as if a great load. The moment you used to go to him to see Sri Ramakrishna, each person would feel as if a great load had been taken off one's back and mind. Whatever doubt was in one's mind was sure to be cleared without putting any question. Yet the Master was always simple and humble in his manner towards everyone, always ready to learn even from a baby. Once Sri Ramakrishna asked a Pandit, have you a commission from the Lord? Have you been commissioned to teach, give the knowledge of scriptures from the Lord? That Pandit, the scholar, was teaching many people, giving a lot of lectures. So Sri Ramakrishna asked his Pandit or that scholar who was lecturing or preaching, have you a commission from the Lord? Have you been commissioned? Has he commanded you to teach? When that Pandit or scholar admitted that he had not, Sri Ramakrishna said, then all your lectures are worthless. People will hear you for a time, but it will not last. What he said proved true. Soon the Pandit lost all his popularity. Everyone began to criticize him and he had to give up preaching. Then one day he came to Dakshineshwar and prostrated before Sri Ramakrishna saying, O Master, all this while we have been chewing the chaff and you have been eating the kernel. We have been content with dry books only while you have been enjoying God and your life. When the master, Ramakrishna is telling, when the master spoke about Sita, the divine mother Sita, the wife of Sri Ramachandra, when the master spoke of Sita, he would become Sita altogether, so that there would be absolutely no difference between him and Mother Sita. If Vaishnava devotees, the followers of Vishnu, are called Vaishnava. If Vaishnava devotees came to him, at once he would become like Lord Gauranga or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He would act, speak, and look like him. So much so that the devotees would prostrate before him, saying, "We see Lord Gauranga or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in you." Once a Christian Quaker who belonged to the Quaker sect, there are different sects in Christianity. So once a Christian Quaker came to him and asked, and as Sri Ramakrishna talked about Christ, tears began to trickle down the man's face, and immediately he fell down, clasping his feet and crying, "I have found Christ in you. I have found Christ in you." In the same way, when the Muslims came, he would so completely identify himself with Muhammad that they would see their prophet in him. Yet behind all these different manifestations, there was always that one Sri Ramakrishna. The Vaishnavas, that is the followers of Lord Vishnu, were in the habit of holding bhajans, devotional singing, kirtans, sankirtan. And since they regarded Sri Ramakrishna as a Paramahamsa, illumined soul, they once asked him to attend one of their meetings. In the hall where they met, there was a high seat which was regarded as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or Gauranga's seat. It was the custom to begin their singing by invoking Lord Gauranga to come down and occupy his place. And then, thinking that he is occupied his place, feeling the presence of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they would continue their singing of the name of the Lord and talking about and reading about Sri Hari. Otherwise, it would not be possible for them to praise the Lord properly. It was actually believed that he did come down and sit on that seat which was reserved for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. On that day when Sri Ramakrishna was present, as soon as they began their invocation, Sri Ramakrishna immediately got up and went and sat down on the sacred seat. Some people, on the spur of the moment, because of that high atmosphere, all their minds were in a high plane of consciousness, they thought it was all right, for he was known to be a very holy man. But others were indignant, seeing, however, that he was in Samadhi, and also perhaps being afraid of Hridayaram, who was with him and who, being a very stalwart man, always acted as Sri Ramakrishna's bodyguard. They did not dare disturb him. The meeting therefore continued, and Sri Ramakrishna remained in his place. Among those who objected to Sri Ramakrishna sitting in Sri Gauranga's or Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's seat was a famous monk, Bhagavan Das. He was revered in the Vaishnava circle as a great realized soul. His name was Bhagavan Das Babaji in Khalna, who lived in Khalna. This sadhu expressed his disapproval very boldly. He criticized Sri Ramakrishna because of that. Sometime after hearing of many things Bhagavan Das Babaji had said against him, Sri Ramakrishna expressed a wish to go to him. Mathur Babu procured a boat and they set out to that place, Kalna. But all the time, Mathur Babu kept on saying, "Why, Baba?" Baba here is father. Baba means father. He addressed Sri Ramakrishna as Baba. Why, Baba, do you want to go to that man? He must be a very wicked person to talk so badly about you. Why should we go there? But Sri Ramakrishna answered, let us go. When they reached the place, instead of getting down himself from the boat, he sent Hriday to see whether the sadhu cared to receive him. When Bhagavan Das Babaji heard that Sri Ramakrishna had come, he ran to the boat and prostrated himself, crying, oh, forgive me, forgive me. I did not know who you were. Sri Ramakrishna at once comforted him and restored peace to his mind. Bhagavan Das Babaji was really a great monk, and he had the power now and then of entering into Samadhi. It seems that while he was in that state, it was revealed to him who Sri Ramakrishna was. And when he realized what a great mistake he had made, he was inconsolable. After that, he went around telling everyone that Sri Ramakrishna had a right to take the place of Lord Gauranga or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's seat, for he was a divine manifestation. The Master never condemned any man or woman. Sri Ramakrishna never condemned anybody. He was ready to excuse everything. He would forgive everybody. He used to tell us that the difference between man and God. What is the difference between man and God? Sri Ramakrishna used to always tell. Was this: if a man failed to serve God 99 times, if a man failed to serve God 99 times, but the 100th time served him with even a little love, God forgot the 99 times he had failed, and the Lord would say, oh, my devotee served me well, so well today. So that is the nature of God. What is the nature of the human beings then? But if a man served another man very well 99 times, and the 100th time failed in his service, so that man who got the service forgot the 99 good services, and he would take up this small mistake and he would criticize him and say, that rascal failed to serve me one day. If there was the least spark of good in anyone, if there was the least spark of good in anyone, Sri Ramakrishna saw only that and overlooked all the rest. So when Sri Ramakrishna tells this difference between God and man, and he himself is following the nature of God by forgiving whatever anybody has committed, and see only the little good in him and try to bring him up. What are we supposed to do? As Swami Vivekananda tells, what is religion? Religion is a manifestation of divinity, which is already within you, which is already within man. So in another place, Vivekananda is telling, what is religion? Religion is the process by which the brute is raised unto man and man unto God. So the evolution of we people from the animal level, from the instinctive level to the human level. What is human level? Intellectual level, where you can discern, where you can discriminate between the real and the unreal. And from the human level, raising yourself to the divine level, becoming God yourself. That process by which your divinity is manifested is religion. So you have to, all of us have to manifest our divinity. So now Ramakrishna is telling what is the way by which we can manifest our divinity. He himself is following that. So we are in the human level always seeing the mistakes of others, finding fault with others. That is humane. When anybody does 100 or 99 good things to us, we forget all that. When one small mistake is committed, we take hold of that and criticize that person. That is human nature. What is God's nature? God's nature is whenever a human being commits even 99 mistakes and does only one good thing to God, He will catch hold of that good thing and praise Him and lift Him up. So, should we not give up this human nature of finding fault and take up even the smallest good thing in others and help them and serve them? Then we too can become divine. That is the way of manifesting our divinity. That is the way of ourselves becoming one with God. So Ramakrishna has shown us such easy way by which we can become divine. So start forgiving. Start finding only good things in others. Stop criticizing others. Stop finding fault in others. Even the least of the good thing. Recognize only that good thing and praise him and lift him and serve that man. Serve anybody, all the living beings. And you see, you will start becoming divine. You will become God yourself. So easy path has been given to us by Sri Ramakrishna. Let us start following it. There are so many other teachings. Implement it quickly. No delay. Brook no delay. Because our time, our life is too short. Start it now. Start this second. The Master never condemned any man. So we should not condemn and find fault with anybody. He was ready to excuse everything. So we should be always ready to forgive everything and everybody. Ramakrishna was ready to excuse, forgive everything, everybody. He used to tell us that the difference between man and God was this. If a man failed to serve God 99 times, but the 100th time served him with even a little love or devotion, God forgets all the 99 blunders we have committed and lifts us up. Oh, my devotee served me so well today. But on the contrary, if a man served another man with 99 good things and one time or the 100th time failed in his service, that man would forget the 99 good services and say, that rascal failed to serve me one day properly. If there was the least spark of good in anyone, any good nature in anybody, Sri Ramakrishna saw that only, only that good nature and overlooked all the rest. So we have a chance to become divine. How? Give up that human nature, the man's nature of finding fault, criticizing others. Start finding only good things, whatever little it may be, and serving those people, seeing only those good things. Then you yourself can manifest the divinity and become one with God. In telling the story of Naren, Narendra means here Swami Vivekananda, would be Swami Vivekananda. In telling the story of Naren's first coming to him, first coming to Sri Ramakrishna, the Master said, when I saw this boy enter the room, I thought, can such a boy come out of this worldly place called Calcutta, where everyone is mad after money and pleasure, where everything is rajasic, extremely active? I could see that his mind was three-fourths turned inward, and that only with the other fourth quarter of his mind was he doing all the other outer things. One corner of his shawl was dragging on the ground, and his hair was a little disheveled, as if he were careless about outer things. During Naren's second visit to Dakshineshwar, when Narendra had sat down, Sri Ramakrishna leaned over and touched his heart through the front of his shirt, which was unbuttoned. Narendra told me afterwards When Sri Ramakrishna touched him in this way, the walls of the room began to recede and disappear. Then the river and all, that is Ganga, which was flowing nearby, the river and all the Calcutta, everything vanished. The floor of the room seemed to sink down into the earth until at last I seemed to be in a vast vacuum in which there was nothing but this Brahmin Sri Ramakrishna standing before me. This is how he told it. But the master, in speaking of it afterwards, said that as he felt all this happening, Narendra started exclaiming, "What are you doing? What are you doing? I have my mother, I have my brothers, my father to look after." But Narendra couldn't remember this. Later, when I asked Sri Ramakrishna whether there was a God, he told me to go to the boy Narendra and ask him. I went and asked Narendra. Then Narendra told me this story, and he added that for 15 or 20 days after this, Narendra seemed to see God everywhere, in everything. Everything seemed to be living. Everything seemed to be conscious, throbbing with life. The ground, the wall, everything there was life. So he came to know that this Brahmin called Ramakrishna was no ordinary Paramahamsa. One day, a drama by Keshav Chandra Sen was to be performed, and Narendra was assigned the part of a sannyasin monk. The master was very eager, expressed great satisfaction when he heard of it that Narendra had taken the role of a monk, and insisted on being taken to see the performance. Narendra acquitted himself most creditably of his task, and after the play was over, the master had him brought out in the hall that he might again see him in the orange cloth, dressed up like a sannyasin. It seemed to give him the greatest pleasure to have Narendra dressed as a sannyasi. From the outset, Sri Ramakrishna's love for Narendra was unbounded, unparalleled. When Narendra did not come to the temple, that is Dakshineshwar temple of Kali, when Narendra would not come to the temple for a time, and the master would grow so restless that he would even weep. Once when I was with him, that is Ramakrishna Shishi Maharaj, once when I was with him, he kept running first to the Ganga side of his room, then to the road side to see whether Narendra was coming. And at last he told me to bring a carriage. Ramakrishna is telling, I ran 2 miles to get one carriage. And together we drove to Narendra's house. We found him in his dingy room on the ground floor. Why have you come? He asked, with evident annoyance on seeing Sri Ramakrishna. What will my family think when they see a sadhu coming to meet me, coming to see me like that? In reality, however, Narendra was annoyed that the master was paying him so much honor. Sri Ramakrishna used to explain that amongst his disciples, there were certain ones who were his antaranga, who belonged to the inner circle, antaranga. That is his inner circle, that they would always come with him wherever he incarnated. These were Narendra, Rakhal Chandra Ghosh, Baburam, Niranjan, who became later on Swami Vivekananda, Swami Brahmananda, Swami Premananda, Swami Niranjanananda. So all these others, about them, Sri Ramakrishna used to explain that amongst his disciples, there were certain ones who were his antaranga, that is his inner circle, that they would always come with him wherever he incarnated. These were Narendra, Rakhala, Baburam, Niranjan, and others. He always predicted that Niranjan would not survive him long, and we saw he did not. Of these Antaranga, he said that Narendra would be the one who would understand him most fully. So it was only Swami Vivekananda who understood Sri Ramakrishna completely. That is why in our order it is told, you cannot understand, you cannot fathom Sri Ramakrishna's depth and vastness. If you try to understand Ramakrishna directly, you will fail. That's why what is it told amongst our monks in our Ramakrishna order? You have to understand Sri Ramakrishna through Swami Vivekananda. That's why we have the saying in our order, Ramakrishna order. What is that? Ramakrishna is inspiration, Swami Vivekananda is interpretation, and Mother Sharda Devi is implementation. So whatever Sri Ramakrishna was, it is difficult to understand, and we have to understand only through Swami Vivekananda. So here Ramakrishnanandaji, Shishi Maharaj is telling of the antaranga, of the inner circle, of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. Ramakrishna said that Narendra would be the one who would understand him most fully. This understanding did not come at once. However, again and again, doubt of Sri Ramakrishna arose in Narendra, and Narendra would shed bitter tears over his lack of faith. Instead of reproaching Narendra, Sri Ramakrishna would weep with him and strive to comfort him. Still, doubt came. Even at the end, before Ramakrishna gave up his body, only a short time before Ramakrishna left the body, this doubt arose in Narendra, but found no expression. It was in his mind. The master caught his thought. He could understand his feeling. However, and he repeated 3 times with great emphasis. When that doubt came to the mind, immediately Ramakrishna could understand the thought in his mind. And that's why Sri Ramakrishna emphatically repeated 3 times, he who was Rama, he who was Krishna, has now incarnated as Sri Ramakrishna. He who was Rama, he who was Krishna, has now become Ramakrishna. He who was Rama, he who was Krishna, has now become Ramakrishna. The threefold repetition indicated the unquestionable truth of the statement. In another place, Swami Vivekananda tells that at the time when he told this, he could see Sri Ramachandra and Sri Krishna manifested there in him. He could see that, he had the vision. And then only he could completely believe that Sri Ramakrishna was an incarnation. While Narendra was still attending college, he used to study all day and spend the night in meditation. This constant use of brain brought on severe pain in his head, which kept him rolling on his bed for several days. Hearing of this pain in the head of Narendra, the master came to the house of a devotee nearby and sent for Narendra. But he cannot get up from his bed. He is having so much of headache. Someone explained, just tell him he will come. The master replied, Narendra came, and as he sat down by the master, Sri Ramakrishna ran his hand lovingly through his hair on his head, saying, "Why, my boy, what is the matter? You have a headache, have you?" Narendra said that at once all the pain in his head left him. It was only on Saturday, sorry, it was only on Sundays that there was a large crowd in the temple because that was a holiday. On the other days, the master was left alone with his only few chosen disciples. Not everyone could stay with him, in order that in one night Sri Ramakrishna might make them perfect. Just as a goldsmith gives a shape to the lump of gold, so Sri Ramakrishna would mold them so that their whole life would be changed and they could never forget the impression he had stamped on them. I'll stop my reading of Ramakrishnanandaji's reminiscences about Sri Ramakrishna here, and we will now go to study the complete works of Swami Ramakrishnanandaji. In his lectures, in his talks in different places, especially in Madras, in South India, he gave a series of lectures. So that has been collected, and many other teachings of his has been put into the form of his complete works of Swami Ramakrishnananda. I've been already reading about it and explaining about it. Now we will continue that. Swami Ramakrishnanandaji in his talks is telling Bhagavan Shri Krishna is describing to Arjuna his infinite nature. He says that whatever special greatness you see in this world, in any person or a thing, wherever, Shri Krishna is telling in Bhagavad Gita, whatever special greatness of power or beauty, somebody might be very beautiful, somebody might be very handsome, somebody might have expressed some special talents in music or arts or whatever. Whatever greatness you see, special greatness, power, somebody has got some power or beauty you see manifested anywhere, Lord Krishna tells that, know that to be a product of a part of my splendor. It is Lord Krishna is telling his splendor, the Lord's splendor. That is all that Lord's splendor. Now, can we now see what is that shloka? The verse where Lord Krishna has claimed this. So that is given in the chapter 10th, verse 41. Verse or shloka 41, chapter 10th. Yad yad vibhuti mat sattvam, yad yad vibhuti mat sattvam, Srimat urjitameva va, tat tat devavagachatvam, tat tat devavagachatvam, mama tejomsha sambhavam, mama tejomsha sambhavam, not sambhavam, sambhavam, mama tejomsha sambhavam. What is Krishna telling in this 41st verse of the 10th chapter? Yat yat, what, vibhutim, glories, sattvam, being, Srimat, prosperous, urjitam, powerful, eva, also, va, or tat, that, eva, only, avagacha, no, for certain, tvam, you, Arjuna, mama, my, tejomsha, sambhavam, manifestation of a part of my splendor. What is the simple meaning of this verse? Whatever being is glorious, prosperous, or powerful, know that only to be a manifestation. Know you that only to be a manifestation of a part of my splendor. So in the earlier verse, 40th verse, Krishna proclaimed the infinite nature of his manifestations. Herein, in this 41st verse, Sri Krishna is telling, he draws Arjuna's attention to his manifestations that are glorious, prosperous, powerful. The Lord still stresses upon his spectacular expressions despite his omnipresence. Krishna adopts this method because the human mind is more easily drawn to anything exceptional. Krishna uses this psychological fact to point out his glory, prosperity, and power manifest in the world. Arjuna finds it easier to spot the divinity in the inspiring expression. The people of the world, we, are either less or more evolved spiritually. The less evolved need a spectacular expression to realize the presence of God. Such people feel inspired when they see something wondrous, staggering, awesome in the world. Their devotion to God is kindled when they visit exceptional and celebrated places of worship. Conversely, the more spiritually evolved people find divinity written upon the leaves, murmured on the brooks, in the brooks, whispered in the winds, and throbbing in their veins and arteries. Krishna understands that Arjuna is devoid of spiritual insight. Hence, he uses the more spectacular expression to draw his attention towards God. So now this verse is translated by Sri Ramakrishna. Was again that Krishna come now as Ramakrishna. So Ramakrishna used to tell, suppose you see somebody having some prodigious memory, some special talent, some special power. So know for certain that it is the manifestation of God. He is the manifestation of the power of the God. So you can easily understand this verse with the expression of Sri Ramakrishna here. So Ramakrishna Nandaji is telling, taking this cue from Sri Ramakrishna's teaching, wherever there is the Bhagavad Gita shlokas explanation, the 41st verse of the 10th chapter, whatever special greatness, power, or beauty you see manifested anywhere, know that to be a product of a part of my splendor. So the Lord is manifested in that person who has all these things, or any one of them. It is only given to a Hindu born. So it is only given to us, the Hindus, who are born in this blessed land, India, and brought up in the traditions of the Sanatana Dharma, Hindu Dharma, the privilege of recognizing the child of Devaki. Who is the child of Devaki? We think that is the child of Yashoda. Yashoda was a foster mother, but the real mother, biological mother of Krishna was Devaki. So, recognizing the child of Devaki, that is Lord Krishna, as the very incarnation of the Lord. But as a matter of regret, many persons educated along Occidental lines, that is the Western education, doubt even the very existence of a higher power that shapes and molds our destiny. Not to speak of those unfortunate souls who feel no compunction of heart to put forth themselves as rank atheists. A little examination makes it clear that atheism or agnosticism creeps only in those hearts too low and narrow to hold higher ideals. So we can also note Why do people become atheist? They have the intense desire to enjoy this world, intense materialism, intense desire for sensual joys. Now, if you follow, if you believe in God, then you have to do so many don'ts are there. You have to check your desires. So they don't want that. So if you give up God, you become an atheist, you can enjoy as you like. So the people naturally take up this atheism. So now Ramakrishna and Ji is telling, oh man, if you had the power of doing anything you desire, I shall not be sorry to recognize you as God. If none had the power of binding you, if you had the metal in you to cross the bounds of death and enjoy ambrosia, bliss forever, the amrita, immortality, if you had the energy to you, in you, if you if you had the energy in you to satisfy the craving for knowing all, to clear the weeds that hide the path to knowledge, if for the time with no effort you could command all convenience to satisfy all the desire of your heart, then he whom we address as God is none but your honorable self. But think of yourself once and you find that you are just the very antithesis of all these suppositions. Do you want to see in your unparalleled beauty? Do you want to see in you unparalleled beauty, but your personality has neither grace nor excellence in it? Do you dream to be a millionaire? But alas, you are the child of poverty. Had you the power, you would not have assured your existence in this world. Through a peasant's hut, you would have preferred to grace a rich man's mansion rolling in the luxury of wealth and convenience. You would never have depended on this fragile, despicable body, heir to a thousand ills of life. You would surely have welcomed a strong and beautiful frame. At times, you are born blind and lame of body, a very picture of misfortune itself. You want to rule over everyone, not to speak of others. Your sons, your children, your daughter and beloved partner in life, your wife or husband, dearer to you than your own self, thwart you at every step and never want to live in obedience to your commands, and you want to control the world. Powerless as thou art, is it not a stroke of lunacy that fills your imagination with such empty hopes? That eternal power, the Divine Mother, binding all herself ever free, energizes you and me and the whole world at large. In course of time, even the most powerful and famous emperor has to lay down his head on the lap of death. He might be the greatest of the emperor. There is a song, wonderful song in Hindi. Bahuveera huve, balavan huve, itne mahipat मान हुए, अब कौन कहा, where are they now? They're so great emperors, so many great kings, such great strong men. Where are they now? Not even their name is heard. So, in course of time, even the most powerful and famous emperor has to lay down his head on the lap of death to have his eternal rest. His funeral pyre consumes with him all his cherished hopes and desires. None can control the time spirit. Kalohi duratikramaha. Kalaha hi. Time itself, the rich becomes poor in no time. The despised beggar of today is tomorrow worshipped by all. Can anyone ever dream of controlling the Kala Shakti, the time? Yet the moment man forgets this irresistible power and feels freedom for himself and dreams, Konyosti Sadrisho Maya, who is there equal to me? That very instant he becomes blind with ignorance. This time principle is a true phase of the divinity. In time, creation, existence, and dissolution take place. So, our Shastras, there is the scriptures call Kala Shakti, the power of time, as the mother of Brahma, the mother of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. She is also none other than the Brahman, the Parabrahman, the highest god of the Vedantis. Wherever you note a greater manifestation of this Kala Shakti, wherever you note a greater manifestation in somebody or in something of this Kala Shakti, their God expresses himself intensely. Those who have read the Bhagavatam, one of the Puranas called Bhagavatam, can understand, not Bhagavad Gita, don't get confused with Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavatam is the life story of Vishnu's incarnation and great story of Lord Shiva, everything comes there. So those who have read the Bhagavatam can understand that in Sri Krishna this power was working in an extraordinary degree. No power could ever bind him, but he could shake the foundations of the most powerful sovereignty of the day. After establishing his own power, Lord Krishna has given out the secret that whenever virtue subsides, whenever there is unrighteousness, whenever virtue subsides and vice prevails, he, the Lord, incarnates to help mankind. When Arjuna got frightened on seeing the Lord's real form, Vishwarupa Darshana, he out of fear requested him to tell him who he really was. The blessed Lord in reply said, Kalosmi lokaha kshayakrit pravrittaha tatepi tvam na bhavishyanti sarve. Kalosmi lokaha. I am, Lord Krishna is telling in that Vishwarupa Darshana, I am the all-consuming time. Time devours everything, isn't it? I am the all-consuming time, Krishna is telling in that verse in Bhagavad Gita. The Lord says again, Ritepitvam na bhavishyanti sarve. I protect none but persons like you devoted to righteousness. This makes it clear that the Lord is devoted to righteousness, dharma, and the establishment of righteousness is his ideal. The working of the Kala Shakti makes this clear. Some are of opinion that in the three previous yugas, that is the Kriti Yuga or Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga and Dwapara Yuga, dharma was protected. But in the present age, the foundation of the dharma do not rest on sound basis. We find so much of irreligion prevailing now. Nevertheless, even in this age, though you may find here and there persons notoriously unrighteous in character, who have become rich by foul means or wrong means, by hook or crook, still even they would never like to be counted as irreligious. Why? Like a ghost that stalks only in the darkness of the night. Adharma never has the courage nor will ever attain the strength to show its face in the naked light. Even now, the spirit of the great ones rules the land. Even now, the rishis, the seers, the sages, the custodians of dharma, righteousness, the various incarnations of Vishnu, the influence of the great Shankara, the incarnation of Shiva, that is Shankaracharya, of Ramanujacharya, the incarnation of Sheshanaga, that is Vishnu's bed, the snake Sheshanaga, and of Madhvacharya, the incarnation of Vayu, Anjaneya, the spirit of Zoroaster, of Jesus Christ and of Muhammad and the very expression of true knowledge and divinity in Buddha Deva, command the respect of the world. They exercise their influence on the various nations and empires of the present world and will forever continue to do so. So there is no doubt in saying that dharma, righteousness alone stands unaffected in the course of the working of all consuming Kala Shakti, the time power. That's why one of the Upanishads states, Satyam eva jayate. Truth alone prevails, nandratam, not the untruth. So dharma, righteousness alone stands unaffected in the course of the work of the all-consuming Kala Shakti. Time never takes its toll from dharma, righteousness, and is partial towards it. He in whom the dharma, righteousness expresses itself to a great extent is acclaimed by the world as the incarnation of God. So anybody who manifests this righteousness in a large quantity, he is revered as the manifestation of God, higher manifestation of God, the incarnation. The Lord has spoken through Arjuna to a world at large that wherever there is fuller manifestation of this power, he, Lord Krishna or Parabrahma, is present there. Even now the appellation of Bhagavan is given to him who is specially endowed with all such graces. Humanity, so Bhaga is some beautiful manifestation of power. If anybody is having these qualities, Bhaga, then he is called Bhagavan. Even now the appellation of Bhagavan is given to him who is specially endowed with all such graces. Humanity falls at his feet and worships him as God. Anyone going contrary to the rules and precepts of these great ones stands outcasted before society. So we will stop going through this wonderful lectures and complete works of Ramakrishna ji. We will take up another aspect of this complete works. We shall see the new discoveries where many things have been noted about Ramakrishna ji or Shishi Maharaj by different personalities. You know, one very close householder devotee of Ramakrishna was Ramachandra Datta. He was a very close relative of Narendranath Datta, would become Swami Vivekananda. So Vivekananda's earlier name was Narendranath Datta. So his close relative was this Ramachandra Datta, was also chief among the householder devotees of Sri Ramakrishna. So he has recorded in his memoirs or in his books about the greatness of Shishibhushan Chakravarti or Swami Ramakrishna ji. What is he telling about Shishi Maharaj? Ramachandra Datta is telling the devoted personal service that Shishi, that is Shishibhushan Chakravarti or Swami Ramakrishna, rendered to Master, has received a glowing tribute from Ramachandra Datta, a prominent householder disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. Ramachandra Datta, in his Life of Sri Ramakrishna, a work that he has composed, Life of Ramakrishna, in Bengali, he says there, Shishi's service is incomparable and inimitable. If selfless service is the proper sense, if selfless service in the proper sense be there in the world, Shishi knew it fully well. So if you have to see what is selfless service in its proper sense, if it is existing in this world, so only Shishi knew it fully well, says Ramachandra Datta. If there be any untiring attendants worth the name, Shashi should be termed the foremost of them all. If anyone wants to see motiveless love, so we speak about these wonderful qualities like selfless service, motiveless love, unconditioned love. We only speak, we can't understand it until it is manifested or practiced by any human being. So Ramachandra Datta is telling, then Shashi is the model for motiveless love. So then continuing, Ramachandra Datta is telling Shashi had only merits, no fault. But there is a proverb that none can be absolutely free from faults. But Ramachandra Datta is telling Shashi had only merits and no faults. Then continuing, Ramachandra Datta tells Shashi served Paramahamsa Deva, that is Ramakrishna, heart and soul, without any question, without any murmur, and without any consideration of personal inconvenience. He would not care for his inconvenience. He would not utter a murmur, no question, only devoted service. If this may at all be called a fault, then Shashi had this fault in full. But it does unconditional service to Sri Ramakrishna, to his Gurudeva. We have only heard of Hanuman's matchless devotion as a servant to his Lord Ramachandra. But we saw that in Shashi. Shashi showed the perfection of such devotion before our very own eyes. Hanuman might have been serving Sri Ramachandra in Treta Yuga, but Ramachandra Datta is telling, we have heard of Hanuman's matchless devotion to Ramachandra as a servant, but Shashi, that is Shashi Bhushana Chakravarti, showed the perfection of such devotion before our very own eyes. No devotees of Paramahamsa can surpass Shashi in this respect. Now, Ramachandra Datta is telling, my statement is not at all exaggerated. All those who approached Paramahamsa Deva had some ulterior motive or others. So here, even to get God, to get Samadhi, that is also considered ulterior. And what were their ulterior motives? How shall I progress in spiritual life? Or how shall I walk on the path of yoga? But these are all very great desires. But Shashi had no such motive whatsoever. His motive was only service of his Guru, service to the Lord, nothing else, not even getting anything out of it. Renunciation or devotion or getting mukti or samadhi, nothing. So Shashi had no motive, motiveless love whatsoever. He surrendered his humble self completely to Sri Ramakrishna. He surrendered his humble self completely to Sri Ramakrishna. This is called self-surrender. We may claim, oh, we have surrendered to God. No, see, this is real surrender. He surrendered his humble self completely to the Master and learnt only the religion of selfless service from him. The practice of that religion in full has made him blessed beyond comparison. There is no doubt that whosoever will hear the thrilling story of Shashi's loving service to the Master will attain devotion to the Master. So do you want to get devotion to the Lord? Then what is Ramachandra Datta prescribing? The prescription given by Ramachandra Datta was a doctor of that time too, in the British era. What is the prescription he's giving if you want to get devotion? There is no doubt that whosoever will just hear the thrilling story of Shashi's loving service to Paramahamsa Deva or Sri Ramakrishna, will attain devotion, will attain bhakti. If you want devotion to God, then read the story, life of Shashi. Now Ramachandra Datta is continuing. Brother Shashi is addressing him. He is not there, but in the book, Brother Shashi, you are indeed blessed. Brother Shashi, you are indeed blessed. You mastered the secret of real service. You, Shashi, mastered the secret of real service to the full satisfaction of your heart. You have done service to Guru, which is the most meritorious act in religious life. Brother dear Shashi, born as a man, you understood the duty of human life. That is why you have been the object of Sri Ramakrishna's special grace. By his grace, you stand at the head of the circle of his attendants. You are his chosen son and servant, and is second to none in service of him. So, these are the things told by Sri Ramachandra Datta, a householder, chief householder devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, about that wonderful service of Shishibhushana Chakravarti to his Guru Sri Ramakrishna. This chapter of Shishi's life closed with the passing of Sri Ramakrishna in the early hours of the Monday, 16th August 1886. But after that, did he stop there? No, he continued the service of Sri Ramakrishna as Gurudeva. Feeling his presence, he could see him in his picture or in his relics. And he continued the same until the end of his life, serving Sri Ramakrishna. Even though he was not there present in his body, he felt his presence and served him until his last breath. So that is Guru Bhakti, that is Seva. If you want to know what is motiveless love, if you want to know what is selfless service, then read the life of Shishibhushana Chakravarti or Ramakrishna, Swami Ramakrishna Ananda. So we will stop our conversation here and we will continue it tomorrow. So temporarily, that is after tomorrow's class, we will stop our reading this life of Swami Ramakrishna Anandaji for a short time, because I will be leaving for Durban on 13th, and I will be taking over as the head of Durban Center, or taking the charge of Durban Center on 18th Krishna Janmashtami, which is auspicious day. And if God wills, I will continue this wonderful life of the different direct disciples from there. So we will see what is in the will of the Lord. So tomorrow will be the last class for this month. Maybe in future we will take up the study, further these studies on the life of the great disciples. So if you have any questions, if you have any doubts about what we have studied today, you can ask. Any questions? There are many questions on the YouTube. So this is a question asked by one doctor, Dr. Sarojini Raju. Jai Ma Swamiji. If a doctor treats every time with utmost care his patients, and by chance, if the patient was not cured, with all his or her effort and patient dies, the whole village will come to scold and insult the doctor. so much so that the doctor will become very sad up to the extent of depression. This hurt is inevitable, Swamiji, unless one is Sthitaprajna. Of course, with certain setup or mindset, community, afterwards they realize their mistake. But the mental trauma undergone by the doctor is too much. Time, it is draining. Yeah. If we are attached to the name and fame, then it will drain us. If we are attached to the service of God, seeing in that patient and serving that patient, seeing God in him, we will not be worried about the result, because whether the patient dies or lives is not in our hand. We cannot control the world. So we have put in the best of the effort as a doctor, and in spite of that, if he dies, definitely we cannot do anything. We have tried our level best. It's but natural. People who have lost their near and dear ones, the people of the village, at that time emotionally they are in a very high state, highly strung. So their behavior, you can understand it. So when they criticize you for this, don't worry, it will remove our karma, bad karmas quickly. And those difficulties, those slurs, that criticism will take us more towards God. It will help us to go. These difficulties, these problems will always make us rely on God. So if we see God, just like Ramakrishna used to tell, Shiva Gnane Jiva Seva, seeing Lord Shiva or Hari or Narayana or whatever, the Lord in the patients or in any people we serve, then we will not be bothered about what is the result. We have done the duty to the Lord, there ends the matter. When I was looking after the students in Bangalore, Ramakrishna Vidyarthi Mandiram, there was one orphan boy. He had only his grandmother, old grandmother. So he was left in our Vidyarthi Mandiram. So I used to look after him because he had nobody, had to take care of him. He finished his matriculation. Then he joined the engineering service. It was engineering college. It was a little far away. So I talked to some of the people there in that faraway village and gave him a small house for him to live. I sent in the I sent in the vessels, the oven, and even the provisions to that house for him to cook, and there should be no problem for his food. I gave him the fees. I didn't do it. It was the Lord's money, whatever that might be. So I made all the arrangements, live there in the village and go to, which was nearby the college, engineering college, to study. So while studying, nobody to control him. Here we used to look after. So naturally, he went out of the way. He fell into the wrong company. Started going to the movies and other places, not going to the colleges. No, there was shortage of attendance, so they didn't allow him to go to the next semester. But he used to come, tell lies, and take money from me, telling that I want from my apron, my shoes. It's compulsory. Then, without doubting, I used to give him, and with that money, he used to go to some movies or some other entertainment. So he deceived me also. Whatever. Then afterwards, there was no attendance. He failed in many subjects, and he couldn't go to the next this thing. So he committed suicide. So now, should I worry about it and stop helping other people? Not at all. I have done my duty, seeing service to the Lord who is in that boy. So the life ended there. So we can't predict that the life of that boy or anybody has to go according to our will. To the will of the Lord, it happens. So there ends the matter. Until then, I did the service seeing Sri Ramakrishna or the Lord in that boy, in that student. So if the Lord wants to end his own life in that boy at that time, what can I or anybody do? So I pray to the Lord, it's your will, there ends the matter. So nothing to worry, nothing to get criticized or anything, feel about it. So start doing your next work to other boy who is, or the child or the girl or the boy who needs your help. Go to your next duty. That's all there is the matter. So nothing to be wasting our energy on what is not in our control. So, but concentrating on what I can do now, what I can do for others. There it's the matter. So, yeah. Any questions here in the live, Google Live? If you don't have any doubts or questions, then I can conclude with the prayer. Om प्रियतां पुण्डरीकाक्षः सर्वयज्ञेश्वरो हरिः तस्मिन् तुष्टे जगत्तुष्टं प्रीणिते प्रीणितं जगत् हरिः ओम तत्सत् श्रीरामकृष्णार्पणमस्तु. Thank you. Namaste. Om Namo Narayanaya. Today in our kutir, that is ashrama, Sri Ramakrishna Kutir, 69A Blandford Road, the unit number 9. The complex is 108. We have a wonderful talk by Dr. Usha Vastarema, like earlier. But this topic is a wonderful topic, which is very beautiful. The last talk was also very special. So all can come and attend here. That wonderful topic on neuroscience, which will help us to understand our thought process, the way of working of our mind, the brain, and get the wonderful benefit of that research of neuroscience. So all are welcome. It will start in the evening at 6 o'clock. People can physically come here, attend, then there will be supper served to everybody. We take the prasad and then leave. All are welcome. Thank you. Om Namo Narayanaya.